Greetings, 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 honor and respect, honor and respect, honor and respect. You are now sitting live and always in archive at your leisure and convenience to the Divine Prince, Pan African Spiritualist, Practitioner, Author, and Advisor, Elagun Oluye Hudu Obeya Bokua, sharing with you in all things spiritual, mystical, metaphysical, cosmic, evolutionary, revolutionary, healing, and holistic from a Pan African spiritualist hoodoo world perspective. This is International New Orleans International Voodoo Day, sponsored and promoted Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes, where we share and discuss all things voodoo, hoodoo, obia, and the like. We certainly are grateful for your consistent support and attendance to this weeknight 9 p.m. Central Standard Time podcast. We're grateful for our attentive audience. We certainly appreciate you, Keisha McKay. Come on in, Nina Lloyd, Daniel Neal, our community. And we're certainly grateful for our co host, our team members of NOIVD, and our community grassroots activists, Jonathan Nylan Tanner, our assistant, our wild man, our first priest, Elder Green, Green Soap, Elder Reggie, Green Soap, Elder Reggie, our team member and financial advisor and spiritualist, and the Queen Mother, Sister Toni Val Martinez. Before I open your mics, I want to remind us where we end on our last show, or where we took a break, I should say, on our last show, and where we pick up again on tonight. We talked about the first scholar to investigate the origins of magic in the African American slave culture, being Albert Roboteau, who documented his findings in Slave Religion, the invisible institution in the antebellum South. He argued that the African styles of worship, ritual forms, and beliefs have survived in North America because of the openness of religions to synchronize with our traditions. He explained how certain aspects of African culture, such as spiritual possession and other magical folk beliefs that can be interpreted as supernatural, were carried to North America through the Atlantic slave trade. He then traced how these original African notions of spirituality were incorporated into slave society and maintained despite conversion to Christianity. Roboteau was the first to analyze folklore, slave narratives, and missionary records in an effort to understand the breadth of slave religion and how the gods of Africa gave way to the God of Christianity. By examining these sources, he successfully articulates the relationship between the natural and the supernatural in slave religion. This focus on the intersection of the slave's culture African heritage with their new faith, however, led him to overlook practices that contradicted Christianity. Roberto neglected to discuss how conjuration, hoodoo, root work, voodoo beliefs about wandering souls and guardian spirits directly oppose the monotheism espoused by the church by demonstrating how newfound Christianity and African traditions merged harmoniously into a creative and unique slave religion. Roberto ignored contradictory spiritual beliefs and thus provided a limited analysis of magic in slave society. And it's a point that our beloved Elder Reggie strongly suggests in terms of our footprint and our demonstration as an organization, NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day, that we don't over focus on sort of the orthodox demonstration of voodoo that might come perhaps in a voodoo day in Benin or in a demonstration from Haitian voodoo culture, but to indeed understand the power and strength of that lineage that rests here north of the border in hoodoo, root work, conjure, the Black spiritual churches and Black spiritualism as it continues to be revived and demonstrated today. Another powerful writer, Yvonne Chirot, on
Mhm.
the contrary, directly addresses Roberto's omission in her work, Black Magic, Religion and the African American Conjuring Tradition, in which she seeks to reconcile the conflicts between slave magic and slave religion. And I think our over focus on slave religion is also an attempt to make voodoo and root work and conjure less scary to mainstream culture, to include Black church folk, and sort of tone down that which otherwise gives people pause when they consider slave magic. And unlike Roberto, she examines both the dissonance and convergence between the two tenets and argues that these practices have been experienced as a single unit within the African American cultural experience, resisting the tendency to polarize religion and magic. Chirot concluded that magic coexisted with Christianity as an alternative means to communicate with the spirits. She suggested that these seemingly divergent traditions have worked together in a complicated, complementary fashion to provide spiritual empowerment for the enslaved. In investigating a cultural aspect that is often overlooked by both scholars and the general public, Chirot relied on personal anecdotes about voodoo and root working, folk stories, works, progress administration interviews, and post Reconstruction newspapers to show how magic became embedded in the African American culture. And although she makes an effective argument that magic is an integral part of slave religion, she does not explain how slaves understood the supernatural. In arguing that religion and magic are linked, Chirot does not distinguish religious practices influenced by Christianity from the existing repertoire of supernatural healing and retributive or punishment rituals that would have already been contained within our ancestral memory. And so I want to invite my co hosts, starting with Joshua Nylan Tanner, and then we're going to progress to Elder Reggie Green Soap, and then the Queen Mother, Sister Toni Val Martinez. We're going to pick up our conversation about this demonstration of supernatural, magical healing and punishment rituals within our culture and our practice. And again, I really appreciate the anecdotal approach that not only Chirot has taken in her work, but Elder Reggie continues to sort of remind us as a group, as an organization, to maintain that connection to the street, to the community, to the field, if you will, to the family. Greetings, Joshua. Come on in, beloved. How you doing?
Hey guys, on the day, all is a blessing. Definitely looking forward to speak more on that topic of conjuring and hoodoo and the mix, the growth of that throughout our society here in America through slavery. Something I've been looking into recently also, and actually I don't want to get talking before. I'm gonna let everyone come in, and then I'll chime in on what I have to bring into the conversation. Elder Reggie.
Yes, I'm here. Thanks, Josh, for the passing of baton. Good evening, Divine. Good evening, Sister Toni. Good evening, collective audience. We appreciate having you guys here. What I want to open up, it's how I'm trying to link this up. It's magic going on in New Orleans in present day time. It may not look like it, but trust me, magic is involved. And I'm talking one Antoine Massey, one of the escapees. The man is showing up on TikTok, Instagram, doing videos. You have the FBI, New Orleans police, the deputy. You have all type of alphabet law forces looking for this man. But he's steady popping up here and there. And the only thing that is allowing that to happen is some form of magic.
This is Toni.
Hey, everyone. Great to be here. How's everyone doing? Elder Reggie, Divine, and that's good. I was thinking that also, Elder Reggie, as the days tick by, but the one I was focusing on is the one that has not been seen at all, period. No hide, no hair of him since the jailbreak, and that's Derrick Rose. Now, remember, they from the Ninth Ward. His mother, I grew up with his mother going to school, and he is the only one who has not made anybody radar at all.
That's true.
I didn't know.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
I didn't even know that. I thought he was the only one that was missing. Massey. There's two of them. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, that's the only one they talking about because they getting bits and pieces because he keep popping up and disappearing. So they constantly, his name is constantly being said, but they not speaking on Derrick Groves except to say no one had seen hide nor hair of him.
Yeah, but see, that's the brazenness of Antoine Massey. And I don't know what type of magic. I don't know his family background, and I don't know who in his family know what. But for him to do this and be that brazen in modern time, there is some type of force that is allowing this to happen and also protecting him. Eventually, he will get caught. But the things he are doing, I'm not comparing it to what the great ancestor Harriet Tubman done, but she was able to be invisible, be here in places she didn't supposed to be where they thought she was, to get people through one state through another. This man is playing with the law agencies with some form of magic. I just the way I see it.
I agree, and again, Shiro makes it clear that we've really over focused on. Well, I shouldn't say over focused, but we've certainly focused on ancestors and religion and tried to wrap or present ATR, Aboriginal and traditional spiritual practice and traditions as something higher vibratory, spiritual, religious, but we cannot ignore the magical frame of reference that we brought along with us in arguing that religion and magic are linked, Shiro doesn't distinguish religious practices influenced by Christianity either from this existing repertoire of supernatural healing and punishment rituals. This ambiguity, in addition to her interchangeable use of the words magic, conjure, and supernatural, leaves the reader unclear to what exactly Black magic is. We have stories of ancestors who flew away from the plantation. We have stories of ancestors who perhaps walked through what we would now describe as some sort of portal after walking concentric circles or some divine mathematical formulation, just vanishing to never be seen or heard from again. So we have to consider this magical root to localized practice and tradition that's often whispered or said in hush-hush spaces, or outright, cast as demonic or satanic and just not discussed. All the fairy tales and myths and stories and legends of vampires and now werewolves and all forms of magical entity that people, believe and understand to exist in this region, feeds this strong magical conjuring context that we often tend to seek to tone down or bastardize to some degree. When we think of Skeleton Key or Serpent in the Rainbow, but there's definitely a philosophy behind sort of the ideas behind these artistic demonstrations. Retributive magic, punishment magic, magic that kept you safe, while at the same time, creating the vortex of retribution upon those who sought to do us the worst forms of wickedness and evil. Again, let's not forget this conversation began with the usage of occult and witchcraft in terms of the process of enslavement from the gate.
Well, Devon, that was well said, because there's a Pastor Brown that the auntie had shouted out that Antoine, turn yourself into Pastor Brown, then go into the police officer. I know Pastor Brown personally from the Lower Ninth Ward. He comes out of the Black spiritual church. Within the spiritual church, we try to shun it away, but we did do hoodoo, we did do voodoo type things, and we did make things seem supernatural. This is not trying to win anybody over in the collective audience. This is real stuff. And I know Pastor Brown knows some stuff. And that's why loosely I said, I don't know who's behind Antoine, but he's popping up and he's showing magic, because we don't know what kind of money his family put and who they went to help him get where he be. In line with what we are teaching tonight, I just want our collective audience to just try to open your mind and see a parallel.
We also got to look at the American Indian culture too. Their spiritual practice believe in 3 different worlds: upper world, middle world, and a lower world. So, and in those different worlds, there's different spiritual entities that operates in those spaces. I don't know them per se off the top of my head right now, but being that, we're talking about hoodoo, we're talking about conjure, we're talking about root work, the land in which these things come out of, the roots, the plant medicine, the animals, everything that is utilized within that type of practice comes from the spiritual practice in a way. So we have to consider that too, in terms of, especially, I was thinking about this earlier about the Haitian Revolution and what made the Haitian Revolution so powerful. I was asking myself that. I was like, what made it so powerful here? And has there been another revolution ever in history where voodoo was utilized to invoke a revolution? And what was that, if there is such a thing?
I acknowledge what you're saying, Joshua. I believe, and I've been doing research, but I haven't hit the nail on the head yet. The 1811 slave revolt, what they call the River Parish, coming up from the Place, making his way to New Orleans, Charles DeLong. Now, he was Haitian born, but I was trying to do research around it to see what some voodoo practice and ritual was used before that night that they decided to, do the revolution there. But I haven't found a linchpin yet. So only thing I can stand firm on is the Haitian Revolution.
I was thinking in terms of Nat Turner.
Okay.
Because Nat Turner used a lot of psalms and a lot of scripture and claimed to know and see things into the future. He was said to be very spiritual. So I was thinking, to look in his direction, in his background a little bit more.
Yeah,
Also,
let me jump in real quick, Toni. I agree with what Toni just said. It again continues our conversation about maroon culture. A great deal of that archive and information is hidden in the documents that speak specifically to maroon cultures and maroon archaeology. There's a document off the top of my head. I can't think of what its name or how to find it right now. I'll bring it to the next podcast about those swampy areas in the Carolinas now using more modern technology to undermap what's going on in that marshy, swampy region in terms of archaeological finds. And they're finding all sorts of magical, spiritual, and even African-oriented items that speak to this profound usage of magic, conjure, and spiritual practice. Again, that predates our exposure to Christianity, that predates, Christianity sort of being wholesale forced upon us. And so our first memories, before we could even start saying voodoo with the U or with the O, would have been embedded in that maroon culture.
Divine, what you speak so eloquent on, in that is the willpower to be free. Even the Maroons did not want to live on plantation under bondage. There's something in the human spirit that wants to be free. And seeking that freedom, they are open to using the supernatural forces at hand if it could get them where they need to be. That's back in the day and even in present day time. The willpower to be free is real strong.
By any means. Yes, by any means necessary.
Yes. And it looks like revolution. It looked like revolution, turning over, disrupting things. But it's in the spirit of wanting to be free. And it looks like revolution. But that's at the foot base of revolution, freedom.
Elder Reggie, when Mass's aunt, I didn't hear her speak, or mother, or whoever it was speaking on Reverend Brown. Is that Raymond Brown?
Yes, hallelujah. Yes.
Yes, I know Raymond Brown. I grew up with him also in the Ninth Ward. Me, him, and Derek Grove's grandmother all went to school together.
Yes.
We shared some of the same classes together.
Yes.
And when he was younger, his family did kind of do some stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
Because some of the kids was scared, you know, in the summertime in the ninth ward. It was no child going hungry. We ran the streets. We decided who mama house we was going to eat at. But nobody wanted to go to Raymond Brown house. And it wasn't because the house was unkept. And you know how you say you don't eat by everybody's house. He had good people. But some of the kids just didn't want to go there because of rumors about them doing certain things. But yeah, and also for Joshua, he got me thinking on what did they call New Orleans East before we called it New Orleans East back in the days of Saint Milo. Because New Orleans East is also another island that is only connected to the rest of the city because of a bridge, because of bridges. And it was called Petite Boys.
Wow.
And it means little woods, which an area of New Orleans East subdivision bears that name today. So that area was more woods than swamp. But it still had a lot of swampy area. And I know for myself, in the late 60s and early 70s, the last building you saw on Chef Highway was St. Mary's Academy. And after that, it was nothing but swamps and woods. You would be on one straight highway, you would see plenty of swamp because you knew what grew in the swamp flora. And then you be on that same one, and then it looked like you in the woods. Because we went all the way down. We went all the way down that one highway. The highway was there, but the buildings weren't. And I go back there now, and I'm amazed that in my lifetime, New Orleans East has grown to be what it is today. It was a lot of draining and a lot of landfilling going on back there. Yeah.
I don't know why I thought the name was the Wrigley's before Gentilly. I thought that was because the Wrigley's got Native American tied to it. I thought that was the name, but you came with Lil Woods. I was wrong.
That's the translation from the French. Now they had Native Americans there because actually what we call Chef Mentor was actually named after an Indian chief.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
That once, that leads us to the connection line, the straight line, when you come off of Gentilly and it turns into Chef Mentor. It's named after Indian chief, but they had lots of Indians there. And people don't realize New Orleans is nothing but a bunch of islands connected by bridges. And take those bridges away in your mind and know where you're at, know where the main city is located. Then think of the lower ninth ward and going there, but the bridge isn't there. And then think of New Orleans East and the bridge wasn't there. How wide that waterway was that they used boats to get from one area to another area where it would be hard for people to maneuver up in there unless they were trappers and hunters and maroons and natives.
One thing I would like to add before we close out, New Orleans in Louisiana was a Catholic city, but for Marlowe to get Saint put before his name, normally the city becomes sainthood, you got to do certain miracles or things of that nature. I don't know what miracles he done, but I know one thing. Mother Marie Laveau was very, very impressed what he done at that time frame, that she kept sacred objects reference to him. But the history, as you try to do a deep dive into history, they don't connect the dots. But for her to manifest stuff with him in the 1800s, he done something that impressed her. even impress others to give him the name Saint. And I find that to be very impressive.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our time has come to an end once again for tonight. We learned a lot. Of course, we're going to be watching the news to keep tabs on what's going on in this city and in the country, especially. Because a lot of things is changing too fast. Can't keep up with it. Scared to turn the TV on in the morning to find out, but you have to keep up with what's going on. So I'd like to turn it over to Elder Reggie so he can close out with the International Voodoo Day message for everyone and keep that on your mind so you can make your plans. Elder Reggie?
Yes. We'll say good night, Divine. Good night, Joshua. Good night, Sister Toni. And good night, Mumbo Salad. Great you showed up. For the collective audience in the chat, we give thanks to Keisha McCoy, Daniel Neal, Ray Alexander, Nina Lloyd, of course, Joshua, anyone else I may have missed. But as the National New Orleans Voodoo Day continue to grow in scope, we highlight present day events, also modern day events, connecting the dots, because voodoo, hoodoo, whatever you call it, is not in a vacuum. These are living entities because we are living people. We eat, sleep, and breathe the vision of these disciplines. So as we continue to build and grow, we'll see as the days come, new events, current events to come forward, and we'll be making mention and also bringing forth our feedback on those situations. But once again, thanks again, everyone, for coming out for class tonight. That's what I like to call it, because we're learning and we're growing. To the one, Hoodoo Voodoo 101, auspices of the New Orleans International Voodoo Day. I would say good night. Ashe, Ashe, Asheo.
AYIBOBO.
Ashe. Good night, everyone.